The political and economic landscape between the United States and Canada has been shaken by a dramatic confrontation that has rippled far beyond North America. Former U.S. President Donald Trump, never one to shy away from bold demands and headline-grabbing moves, has reportedly sought direct influence, if not outright control, over strategic Canadian ports. His reasoning, according to sources close to his circle, was rooted in the belief that America's global trade power is being undermined by foreign bottlenecks, logistical weaknesses, and what he calls unfair leverage by international partners. But in a move that has stunned observers and emboldened Canada's position on the world stage, Mark Carney, former governor of both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, and a respected voice in global economics, delivered a firm and public rejection of Trump's bid. The rebuff was not merely a polite dismissal. It was an emphatic refusal that cast Trump's push as unrealistic, overreaching, and humiliating for U.S. trade ambitions. For international audiences, the rejection is more than just a clash of personalities between a populist political heavyweight and a seasoned economic strategist. It is a symbolic moment that illustrates the shifting balance of power in global trade relations, the growing confidence of U.S. allies in standing their ground, and the widening gap between Trump's vision of America's dominance and the realities of today's interconnected economy. Canadian ports are not just infrastructure. They are lifelines to international shipping, gateways to the Pacific and Atlantic, and critical nodes in supply chains that bind North America to Europe, Asia, and beyond. Control over them would mean influence over trade flows that impact billions of dollars in goods. For Trump, demanding access or influence over these ports was a bold stroke meant to restore U.S. supremacy in global trade. For Canada, however, it was an intolerable infringement on sovereignty, an unacceptable attempt to dictate policy from the outside. Mark Carney's no was not whispered in backroom diplomacy. It was delivered with clarity, broadcast to the world, and designed to remind both domestic and international audiences that Canada will not yield to external pressure, even from its most powerful neighbor. In a single statement, Carney positioned Canada not as a junior partner bowing to Washington's demands but as a nation asserting its independence on the world stage. The symbolism has not been lost on commentators from London to New Delhi, from Beijing to Berlin. The message is simple. America's era of unilateral demands is fading, and allies, once deferential, are beginning to chart their own course. For Trump, the rejection was more than a political inconvenience. It was a humiliation that cut at the core of his rhetoric about restoring American greatness. In fiery remarks afterward, he denounced Canada's leadership, accused Carney of acting against the interests of free trade, and suggested that the United States could retaliate economically if its demands were not taken seriously. Yet the tone of his statements revealed not power but frustration. Global analysts quickly seized on the irony. The world's largest economy, accustomed to dictating terms, had been told no, in stark and unambiguous terms by a close neighbor with a far smaller population and GDP. To understand the drama of this moment, one must step back and consider the long history of U.S.-Canada trade relations. For decades, the two countries have shared the largest bilateral trading relationship in the world. Goods, services, and resources flow freely across their border, from Canadian lumber and energy supplies to American machinery and agricultural products. The North American Free Trade Agreement, later renegotiated into the USMCA under Trump himself, symbolized the deep integration of their economies. Yet this closeness has always been shadowed by asymmetry. The United States, with its massive market, often sets the tone. Canada, pragmatic and resource-dependent, has historically navigated carefully, seeking to maintain sovereignty while benefiting from access to its southern neighbor. Trump's demand for control of Canadian ports shattered that delicate balance. It wasn't a request for negotiation over tariffs, nor a proposal for expanded trade cooperation. It was seen as a naked attempt to secure leverage over Canada's most vital trade infrastructure. To Carney and to Canadian officials, acquiescing would mean surrendering national control over economic arteries, effectively handing Washington the ability to dictate not only U.S.-Canada trade but also Canada's connections to Europe and Asia. The rejection was therefore not just about economics. It was about national pride, sovereignty, and the principle that no ally, however close, should have the right to commandeer another nation's infrastructure. The global response has been telling. European allies, long wary of Trump's confrontational trade tactics, quietly welcomed Carney's firmness. In Brussels, officials pointed to the incident as evidence that middle powers can stand up to Washington without catastrophic consequences. In Beijing, the news was framed as further proof of America's weakening global influence. Chinese state media emphasized that if even Canada, America's closest ally, could openly defy Trump, then U.S. leverage elsewhere must surely be on the decline. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, energy-producing nations watched with interest, seeing in the drama an opportunity to position their ports and shipping routes as alternatives for global trade, further reducing America's centrality. Within North America itself, the fallout has been dramatic. In Washington, lawmakers split sharply along partisan lines. Trump's allies accused Canada of betrayal, warning that the refusal would jeopardize U.S. jobs and supply chains. Critics, however, argued that Trump's demand was reckless to begin with, a move designed more for political theater than for genuine economic strategy. In Ottawa, Carney's stance has been celebrated as a moment of national assertiveness. Political commentators hailed it as proof that Canada is no longer content to be a quiet partner but is ready to project confidence on the world stage. Across Canadian cities, newspaper headlines proclaimed the rejection as a defining moment in modern U.S.-Canada relations. Economically, the immediate impact may not be catastrophic, but the symbolic effect is profound. Canadian ports remain open to international shipping, but the idea of U.S. oversight has been banished. Investors, trade analysts, and multinational corporations are now recalibrating their assumptions about North American supply chains. If Canada is willing to push back against U.S. demands, then the predictability of U.S. dominance is no longer assured. This could lead to new alliances, new trade corridors, and new opportunities for countries eager to diversify their partnerships away from Washington's orbit. For Trump, the humiliation may linger well beyond this moment. His brand of politics thrives on projecting strength, dominance, and deal-making prowess. To be publicly rebuffed by Canada, often portrayed in American discourse as the friendly, compliant neighbor, is a blow not only to his narrative but also to his credibility among international observers. It highlights the widening gap between his vision of a world where America dictates terms and the present reality where allies feel emboldened to resist. International audiences should view this incident not as an isolated spat but as part of a larger pattern. Around the world, America's traditional leverage in trade has been eroding. The rise of China as a global economic powerhouse, the consolidation of the European Union's trade authority, the growing influence of middle powers like India and Brazil, all of these trends have combined to create a multipolar landscape. In such a world, America's demands no longer carry the automatic weight they once did. Carney's refusal of Trump's demand is thus emblematic of a new era in which even America's closest allies assert their sovereignty and refuse to play by Washington's script. And yet, the drama is not without consequences for Canada itself. By defying Trump so openly, Ottawa risks retaliation from Washington, whether through tariffs, restrictions, or political pressure. U.S. markets remain crucial for Canadian exports, and any disruption could hurt industries from auto manufacturing to agriculture. Carney and Canada's leadership are gambling that the symbolic value of resistance outweighs the potential costs. They are betting that in today's interconnected world, international sympathy and support can mitigate the risks of American retaliation. As this story continues to unfold, one thing is clear: the old certainties of U.S. dominance in North America are being challenged. Trump's demand for control of Canadian ports may have been rejected, but the echoes of that rejection are reverberating across boardrooms, parliaments, and diplomatic circles worldwide. It is a reminder that power is shifting, that allies are asserting themselves, and that humiliation, even for the world's most powerful country, can come from unexpected quarters. For global viewers, the lesson is profound. This was not just a quarrel between two men or two governments. It was a moment that encapsulated the changing nature of world trade, the fragility of old alliances, and the drama of a world in transition. The humiliation of U.S. trade ambitions, broadcast for all to see, is part of a broader narrative that will define geopolitics for years to come.